Hello, dear friends. Patrick here again. I want to cover Chapter 12, Part 12, covering Chapter 12 called Arms, Races, and Evolutionary Theodicy. I tried to make this video the other day, and as fate would have it, I got interrupted by a tornado warning on my phone. Imagine, of all days. So there you go. So I'm trying to start over, and the point I was trying to make, which I made in much more detail in the last video, and I may include maybe some clips of it, was that what Dawkins does is he says that if he said from the point of a creator, the things that are created are terrible, but if they're created by evolution, they're great. And he repeats this argument over and over again, and in my previous video I made a number of examples of how he did that. And he just goes on and on and on. He talks about the difference between a designed economy and an evolutionary economy. He says in a designed economy, there'd be no trees, or certainly no very tall trees, no forests, no canopy. He says trees are a waste. Trees are extravagant. Right? Tree trunks are standing monuments to futile competition. Futile if we think of a planned economy. But the natural economy is not planned. And if it's done by evolution, then that makes sense. He also talks about the eye. He says the eye is a horrible design. It's flipped over backwards. A designer should never have done it like that. They should go back to the drawing board and make it perfect the first time. And I'll mention that as we go through here. But then he says, oh, but from evolution standpoint, oh, it's fine because evolution takes it and fixes it and makes it work better again. So this is the argument that he kind of repeats through here. Now, of course, so he's talking about trees. He doesn't talk about what exists above the Arctic Circle, above the tree line, where there's lichen, moss, and tundra. He doesn't talk about that. He says everything about trees is compatible with the view that they were not designed, which is just a stupid, idiotic statement. You could just as well say everything about trees is compatible with the view that they didn't evolve. He just pulls that out of the air and then uses biobabble to keep going on and droning on about all these, goes off in a million different directions. Now, I want to bring to your attention mostly is page 384. And this, I cannot imagine that this is actually Richard Dawkins speaking, because this is obviously the words of some demonic individual or force that is writing these words. This is what he says. He says, does the designer's left hand not know what his right hand is doing? Is he a sadist who enjoys the spectator sport and is forever upping the ante on both sides to increase the thrill of the chase? He's talking about the battle between cheetahs and gazelles and how, there's a balance between the populations of both. Sometimes the cheetahs don't get enough to eat, they starve, and sometimes the gazelles overpopulate. But he says that this horrific suffering on either side is an example that the creator is a sadist, right? Then he goes on to say, did he who make the lamb make thee? He asked a question. That is like so Luciferian in its approach, right? Yea, hath God said? Remember, that's what Lucifer said. He follows the same tack. He says, is it really part of the divine plan that the leopard shall lie down with the kid and the lion eat straw like the ox? He doesn't footnote this to let the reader know that he's pulling this straight out of Scripture, but that's where it comes from. You obviously know that, right? That's a prophecy for when Messiah comes, the lion will eat straw like the ox. And this is why a lot of people to this day don't accept Jesus Christ as the Messiah. They say, well, if he was the Messiah, the lion would lay down with the ox. I had a gentleman tell me this argument many years ago. And it's a prophecy for when Christ returns to earth and brings his kingdom to earth, when the curse of creation will be taken away. And you'll see things like this, the lion and the lamb lying down together. But until that time, we endeavor to persevere. But he uses this as a slag against God. Don't forget, this book is an attack on God and creationists. It's not a book about zoology. It's not David Attenborough, natural wildlife television show saying, oh, look at the wonders of nature. No, all his arguments about the wonders of nature and how fantastic they are to return back to attack the Creator God. He hates God with a passion. We've already seen that through his other books, The God Delusion, where he goes on for paragraphs insulting God about how all the bad qualities of God, that he's genocidal, that he's homicidal, that he's, phobic this and phobic that. And he just goes on and on and on, tears the strip out of God in that book. Well, it all comes out in this book as well. He's got the exact same motivations, just so that you're aware. So page 384, you can see it with nothing held back. So he says, on the next page, he goes on to say, nature, he says, never overbreeds for anything. Nature gets the balance right. See, if there's a creator, there's all this chaos and the animals are killing each other, and it's a horrible type of economy, he calls it. It's unbalanced and this, that, it's all terrible. Oh, but when he goes back to nature and natural selection and evolution, he says, oh, it's perfect. It's just, it gets the balance right. He says here, the world is full of genes for getting the balance right. That is why they are there. Can you see how duplicitous his arguing is? How biased and unbalanced it is? He looks at all the marvels of nature and says, oh, it's so marvelous what evolution has done. But if you mention anything about a creator, say, oh, that's horrible. What a horrible job the creator did. What a two-faced hypocrite, right? He talks himself in circles. He paints himself into a corner, and then he finds no way to get out. He says here on the next page, the relative numbers of alternative genes and gene pools that are juggled and balanced by natural selection. There's that abracadabra again. Natural selection. Who's to say it's not God's creative wisdom that does that? There is no outside explainable force for a self-replicating molecular DNA molecule that's able to regenerate itself. There is no explanation for that. That divine energy has to come from somewhere. The laws of entropy, the laws of the conservation of energy, right? That has to have an outside spiritual guiding force for that to happen. We're told in Scripture, the body without the spirit is dead. He said, if your spirit left your body, you're just a mass of flesh and blood and tissue and bones, and you would die in a heap. It is the Spirit of God that animates. That's why he says he imbued humanity with the breath of life, right? But that's all nonsense for Dawkins. He won't go there. And he even says that such planned, he talks about de-escalation in the arms race, and he says it has to be planned when it comes to the human geopolitical environment. But when it comes to nature, there's no planning because it's just done by evolution. You can't use the word planning. You're not allowed, right? And I could go on and on this chapter, but I'm going to cut it short. I just wanted to bring out those most important quotes, and I'll put them in the description of the video as well. He talks about how it would be so easy for a gene to reduce suffering when they get killed by other animals. A gene could produce that, natural selection. But he says because God is so wicked, God never did that. But God could have done that. He fails to mention anything about retrograde amnesia. What about that, Mr. Dawkins? You know that sometimes when people have a traumatic event happen in their life, their memory removes the traumatic event. So let's say they run their car into a bridge abutment, they end up in a coma, they wake up 6 weeks later, and they say, well, the last thing I remember was putting my shoes on in the morning. They don't remember driving into the abutment. They don't remember having a fireman pull them out limb by limb almost, where they're all beat up and mangled and smashed and tortured. That's all gone. And God is able to take that away. If he's able to do it by retrograde amnesia, he's able to do it when a person dies. Who's to say he doesn't do it to the gazelle at the last minute and the gazelle feels nothing? We don't know that. But in Dawkins' mind, it's horrific. All this animal suffering is horrible, and a righteous God would never do that. If there was a creator, he would never do that, or he'd be a sadist, right? That's the only options he leaves for the reader. So keep aware of the motivation of Dawkins, that his mind is futile. His reasoning is futile when it comes to the magnificence of God. How far above his ways are from our ways. His thoughts are so far beyond our thoughts, we can't even imagine what God is like. And he cares about his creation. He cares about animals. He cares about humans. But in Dawkins' mind, there is none of that. There is no caring. It's an unfeeling universe, and all he talks about is evolution and natural selection, and they have no feelings, no planning, no caring, no nothing. And this is why he continually calls humans naked apes, right? He says, unlike our hypothetically beneficent designer, natural selection is indifferent to the intensity of suffering. He says that in 395, and then he goes on with all his gobbledygook. So how am I doing for time here? Yeah, I've already hit the 10-minute mark, so I'm going to wind that up for that. He finishes the chapter by quoting from this guy, the Reverend William Buckland, who gave this kind of Pollyanna argument for why suffering is allowed in the animal kingdom. And obviously he does it as a type of sarcasm to include that, to say, look how ridiculous it is to say that the animal suffering helps the overall situation, so to speak. And you can ignore that because that is just a rather elementary argument. Obviously, that's why he included it, so that he could laugh at it. But we have to think beyond that, that God is beyond our thoughts, that God is able to wipe away every tear in eternity, that even the memory of earth will one day pass away, that all this human suffering that we have to go through on this planet is all going to be gone someday. In light of eternity, we will not have any memory of it. That's what it means to have every tear wiped away. Yeah, it's horrific at the time, and we think, oh, God, it's so unfair, that I have to go through the suffering, and that children have to starve in different places in the world, and wars and all that. Yeah, it is. The history of the world is a history of pain and suffering. But there's an eternity. God is able to balance things out. That's why there is an eternity. If there was no eternity, the world wouldn't make any sense. And for atheists, it doesn't. They see it as futile and just, a ridiculous bad joke on humanity, basically. This is why their mind and hearts and thoughts are darkened, and they come up with horrible, malicious conclusions about God, about themselves, and about humanity. And that's why they consider humanity to be a virus and just might as well wipe off the people to preserve the planet. So their morality gets turned upside down because their hearts and mind are darkened because they fail to acknowledge God. So that's all I want to say about chapter 12. In the next video, we'll move on. Will be chapter 13. Thank you so much for watching. I love you. God bless you. Spend time with people you love, and we'll talk to you again really soon, okay? Take good care of yourself. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.